Vážený pane ministře,
Dear Minister,
vážený pane náčelníku generálního štábu,
dear
vážení významní
Chief of
hosté,
Staff,
děkujeme moc
dear guests,
organizátorům za příležitost
we would like to thank the
svolání tohoto
organizers
panelu
for
k nastolení tématu českého
setting
obranného
up this
průmyslu,
panel on the
jeho
topic
aktuální situace
of Czech
a
defense
aktuálních výzev,
technologies and how to keep them at a
které
world-class
jsou
level and how to respond to the current challenges, which are
Já
great.
bych si dovolila
I would like
rychle
to
navázat na vystoupení pánů ministrů.
react to what ministers mentioned and to react to their speeches.
Rozumí,
And I'm glad to hear that they understand the current
přihlásili
challenges.
se k zásadním prioritám,
They
které jsou
reiterated the main priorities and defined them in the need to promote security of the Czech Republic, to take care of the defense of this country. It was mentioned by both ministers. These are positive messages that we are all waiting for. Welcome them. And now we need to discuss how
na tyto priority v součinnosti využít v součinnosti s českým obranným průmyslem.
these priorities can be taken further in cooperation with the Czech industry and which conditions are needed.
Tak jak řekl i pan ministr Havlíček, mít tu smart
In order
vládu,
to
která
have a smart
využije
government
příležitostí,
which will use the opportunities and support its economy. We know, and we've heard it by the Czech members of the government in the past, that the Czech defense industry has the potential to be the driving force of Czech economy. Our advantage is that we have a very good and strong defense industry, which has strong tradition and innovation potential. We have a number of technology companies, startups that reacted very quickly to the developments in Ukraine and that are sending its systems to Ukraine, are able to increase research and development and tap into their unused potential. Because we need to tap into our potential if we want to be truly smart, just like Minister Havlíček mentioned. So let's talk about which conditions need to be fulfilled, what the main drawbacks and weaknesses of our systems are in order to remedy our weaknesses, in order to move our defense capabilities further, in order to react to the unprecedented challenges, and also how to make our system more efficient and streamline our processes to be able to react to the current challenges. We have a number of experts here. Jakub Thomas, member of the board of directors and commercial director of ERA, Colonel Marcel Vašíček, director of the Military Intelligence Satellite Center, Olga Chabr Grillová, a general partner of venture capital, and Tichomír Jenkut, venture capital, Presto Ventures. Thank you very much for coming here, and I would like to say that these speakers were chosen very well because they should emphasize the main triangle of our stakeholders. So, industry on one side, technology users on the other side, and the third corner or the third part is the financial sector. So let's start our discussion, and let's say what makes our technological superiority. I will ask the first question, Jakub Thomas. I think ERA needs no introduction because everyone knows this company. It's a supplier of top-notch surveillance systems. So perhaps tell me where ERA stands in comparison with other European stakeholders and companies.
Vážený pane ministře, místopředsedo vlády, vážení
Dear Prime Minister, dear ministers, members of the government, and Chief of Staff, dear generals, ladies and gentlemen. Martina, thank you for inviting me to be a member of this panel. I would try to say what or how we perceive the statements mentioned here in ERA company. Because in the area of expert, we managed to give our systems to 74 countries worldwide. So even great players on the world field consider our company to be very efficient in the area of passive surveillance systems, which means that even great players become inspired by our marketing claims. And the fact that we were successful in many tenders, including NATO tenders, is very important, and we very much appreciate the fact that our technologies were selected as part of international military assistance, for instance, to Ukraine, and that we were the first Czech technology company who was able to use the EPF, European Peace Facility tool or instrument. When coming to this conference, and that's how I would like to open this panel, I asked myself what the main reasons for keeping our company at the world level are. First of all, long-term perspective. We are in the defense industry. Defense is here to will be here forever. Even though we see how missile area is important, but still defense is here to stay. And I'm glad that we are part of Omnipol Group, which understands defense and aerospace area very well. Second of all, innovation and investment. Investment in research and development. The current number, over 55% of employees is engaged in research, development and product management. Since COVID, our goal is to participate more in various subsidy programs, and we can see Christina Helm on behalf of OPP. And as she's mentioned before, yes, the administrative or the paperwork is great. It's a great burden, but still, it's a beautiful network of contacts, even though the contribution is 500,000 euros. Third of all, focus on the users. We very much appreciate our cooperation with the Army of the Czech Republic. It's very important to be engaged in individual military exercises and have very close ties with the Army. And fourth of all, and I promise this is the last point, the fact that we are learning from the greater and the more experienced world leaders, European leaders, both in the area of business as well as life cycles, sustainable life cycle. We have to look at how European and world companies are cooperating with their respective governments. One British company taught us a beautiful word, frenemy, friend and enemy. And it's a great characteristic of European defense industry, because sometimes we are competitors, whereas other times we need to cooperate. And various European initiatives that we have at this point are the platform for cooperation. Thank you, Jakub. And now I would like to turn to Mr. Vašíček, Director of the Military Intelligence Satellite Center. I would like to ask you to briefly introduce SATCEN, your military satellite center, and its importance in this ecosystem. Good morning, everyone. Minister, the generals, my name is Marcel Vašíček, and I am the director of the Military Intelligence Satellite Center, and I'm glad to have been invited here, because since we are part of military intelligence, there are not that many pieces of information available regarding our center. Our center is focused on strategic intelligence, image intelligence. We receive satellite images for the purpose, for the needs of the Czech army and Czech administration. We distribute them. We buy the satellite images on behalf of the users, and then we provide them to the users mentioned free of charge. We save state or government money, because when we buy a satellite image once, we can distribute it to the stakeholders several times. This is being done based on the role that we received in 2019. Following a resolution of the government, we became a national authority, which is connected to the tasks that we have, saying that we provide satellite images and related services to the Czech government. This helps, or this contributes to the defense of the Czech Republic as well. And on the top of that, we also provide services to NATO. We are the greatest contributor to the image and genoid community, meaning image or satellite intelligence. And since 2020, we've been one of the 2 countries who provide satellite data for NATO to gather with the USA. And we received a letter from NATO thanking us for our current support, for the support that we provide, which was also not only appreciation, but a great support for our future activities. Not only that we provide these pieces of information for the provision of security and defense of our country, we also try to develop the Czech defense industry that I will mention in cooperation with Golem X project. And we also use technologies made and developed in the Czech Republic. Thank you. Perhaps I would focus on Golem X. Could you tell us more about the cooperation with the Czech industry on this project, and also in the context of how you emphasize the importance of military intelligence and your satellite center within NATO? What were the key factors that moved you to the top within NATO? Well, what helped us become the best? First of all, support provided to military intelligence, because building capabilities that we've had for some 20 years, but at a different level, at the level of several people with a low or small budget. It wasn't possible, but in 2018 we established a satellite center that was heavily invested in technologies and both in personnel. Currently, we have the best experts that I, as the director, could have imagined, because they are great experts, professionals, and in any activities that we do, they are perceived experts not only within the Czech Republic, but also at NATO level. We also attend various trainings and also provide trainings at a NATO level in the area of image intelligence or satellite intelligence. At first, we set out to create a clear vision. The vision is that military intelligence is a strategic tool for strategic support, and it needs to have access to data, good and quality data, because we cannot find ourselves in a situation when we lack the necessary and relevant data. And we cannot be in a situation when we wouldn't be able to provide the data to the statutory users. So we established several agreements with key companies abroad, which are able to provide satellite images with the resolution that we need. But we told ourselves that one day we will want to be independent, because we do not want foreign companies to know where our interests lie, what we do, how we approach our tasks. That's why we decided to change the course of development, to develop our own capabilities. We use AI, develop AI for analysis of satellite data, and we also develop our own satellite systems. Just like Minister mentioned before, this proved relevant in the conflict of Ukraine, because when the conflict broke out, we had no one gave us any data. We had to get to the data ourselves. And the same was proven again this weekend when the conflict in the Middle East broke out. The same situation, but we were able to resolve it very quickly. So we are engaged to both in national projects because we know that the support to Czech defense industry is very important. And the Czech industry is doing very well, especially in the area of space technologies, AI, and others, and so on.
Thank you. So you have confirmed that data sovereignty plays a key role and it gives us a strategic value. So now I would like to turn to colleagues from venture capital funds. And I have a question to Olga Chabr Grillová from Luminova Ventures. What about you? What is the technology of key importance that should be developed, and what should the Czech industry have from the point of view of venture capital funds? Well, we invest mainly into dual technologies, and we are aware that we have historic potential in companies that work in the area of cybersecurity and AI, and we believe that the potential that we want to increase are the technologies that could help the defense systems and also Czech companies. That's why we say dual technologies, because strengthening of the resilience, as we've heard, such as data security, autonomous technologies, cybersecurity. So these are those that we really need to have really at the top of the value chain. Thank you very much. And what about you, Tichomír? Could you tell me what are the key technologies into your fund that your fund invests into? Thank you very much for the invitation. Presto Tech Horizons is a joint venture fund in cooperation with CSG, and we invest into technologies that contribute to sovereignty and military capabilities of NATO and allies. So it's not only about defense technologies, but anything that actually contributes to a smooth flow and better capabilities and better sovereignty. So this range is among or from cyber solutions, quantum computers, chips, radars, and also defense technologies such as drones, drone infrastructure, and also rockets and rocket fuels. What is the position of the Czech Republic? Is it difficult to find projects, or do you have many Czech entities that you could invest into? Well, there is a huge potential in the Czech Republic, and we have many interesting companies, but we also focus on the Czech Republic as well as other NATO countries, because in the Czech Republic, what is missing is the segment when we have a prototype ready and we can test it. And we have a strong team that knows how to get to companies that are present here today and how to do a deal with them. In France, in the US, we have various innovation incubators that speed up the process, and we are missing the segment into which the startups could jump into. And if you want to invest as an investor without being afraid that you really invest only into presentation, we do not have companies that have been tested. They would have a contract with CSG or with Colt. So we have many candidates that could open up the door to these companies. Lockheed Martin have and many other companies have their own venture capital funds that actually bring these opportunities, and this is something that is missing in the Czech Republic, and we want to do something about it. I need to say that the Czech Republic is a huge technological talent. Universities producing engineers and IT specialists are often compared to world universities much better. The talent is huge, but what is missing is the business support and support of startups. And if we manage to better utilize the talent that is huge, it would really contribute not only to the economy and also the industrial base. So the support to startups and academia is something that we are missing, whilst there are technological talents. So how would you describe today's ecosystem? What are the main principles, or what are your main partners, or how do you perceive the cooperation with various state agencies? We have representatives of Czech Invest, from NATO, Diana, that incubates startups. So what is needed from your point of view to improve in our system and to support more? I would say that, for example, NATO, Diana, while we cooperate with them very closely, it's the right step how to get the business world and the startup world closer, because all the companies that go through this program have a much stronger relation to individual elements, and there is a process in place as the cycle before you make the first deal with Boeing, Thales could last for a year if you have the exact right parameters and contacts. If you do not have the right contracts, you don't have all the certificates, you can knock on the doors and for 5 years and you will never get in. So these accelerators really help a lot. Czech Defense Hub and NATO Diana are really great projects. They hugely contribute to the capabilities of NATO, and I'm glad that we have such a good quality acceleration site in the Czech Republic, and we can get inspired by, for example, Brave One in Ukraine, that gives equity-free grants for startups that then help develop technologies and are looking for a customer within the army, whether it's at the level of brigades or the Ministry of Defense. And of course, it makes sense that Ukrainians are the leaders because there is war there. But this organization was created out of the need. But similar organizations to Brave One at the level of the European or Czech context would actually be able to help startups. A huge topic for the Czech defense industry has been and is funding from established financing institutions. There are new initiatives on the European level. So I have another question. How do you perceive the fact that financial institutions, including venture capital funds, actually perceive the defense industry? Has there been a certain change in the 5th year of war in Ukraine? Well, it's clear that it is true for you, but how do you see it within the context of other venture capitalists? Well, the change is quite obvious. At the same time, we invest into dual technologies, so technologies that are not perhaps offensive technologies, but improve resilience. But if we talk about Estonia, they are quite surprised that we do not have also offensive technologies, because the mentality is slightly different here. Well, we mainly support dual technologies here, and banks, to get a loan for a startup when you have no revenue is not easy. There are not that many grants. The process is difficult. So either the startup goes through a grant, through research, and then they actually will find a partner. There is no other alternative. In France, we see that the support is more intensive as far as grants are concerned, so they can use the proper sort of shelf and they can start working. And well, we've talked about the accelerators, and it's a pity that there are not many Czech startups. Because if you want to qualify, you need to have a prototype, you need to have a partner, and the process is slow, and this is something that we are missing. I would give you two examples. The European Investment Fund, EIF, which is the largest supporter of European venture capital funds. Several years ago, there was no discussion about defense in Brussels or financial support of funds. Last year, the EIF founded its sub-fund that funds venture capital funds that focus on defense technologies. And in 3 months, 150 million euros were drawn because there were so many good quality projects. So the European Union decided to give the money, and we know that they are now working on a fund worth 300 million euros that should be open in June. And also I talked to an expert from a fund focusing on space technology. The fund was established in 2016. And in the contract with investors, they had a clause saying that they cannot invest in defense technology. And if some of the technology is used for defense technology, there is a lengthy approval process. And I talked to him on Tuesday, and he said that the clause was silently removed, and they are being opened more and more to defense technologies, and they are considering also exposure for arms and arms systems and weapons. So are you able to actually ensure good results when talking about cooperation with key partners within the defense industry and also the final users? Well, we are very uniquely positioned as we are a joint venture with CSG, which is a company with unbelievable contacts and technologies all around the world. And that helps us to support portfolio companies to get to final users, to the manufacturing sites, to validation through testing or some technology experts. So that's one thing. And we want to get the best companies into our portfolio, and the best testing is currently in Ukraine. So when we invest, we try to interconnect them with the huge network of contacts in Ukraine. They help with testing immediately at the front line or at testing networks in the vicinity. Well, we invest into a team that is actually quite good at placing that. So it seems to me that they are really doing a great work. They have good contacts, and there is interest in terms of cybersecurity or big data processing, as companies are not able to do it and they are always under threat. And I can see it while we receive emails from various our divisions. And I remember there was a cyber attack and one system went down. But what is a pity that in the Czech Republic, the penetration of these technologies is relatively low. they are not accepted, and we need to evaluate what is the origin of the system, who processes the data, and to have our own European leaders that process and therefore also own the data. We see the example in the US. It's not only about proper penetration of the market, but good distribution. So there are also issues that could block this development. But what I wish that all startups are able to penetrate not only into the defense industry, but also into the civilian sectors, because we are just vulnerable. Yes, so thank you very much for your position. And I have a question for the end user, one of the examples, such as SATSEN. So how are you able to absorb new technologies, being the military intelligence? You said that you are preparing close involvement or an incorporation of AI. So how successful are you in that?
In the area of military intelligence, we are doing quite well. Of course, we have some limited possibilities since we are military intelligence and we work in security regime. Of course, our systems have to go through security testing, and we are limited to a certain point. But we are doing well. We cooperate with the best companies, for instance, in the area of AI implementation, because we need AI a lot. We don't have an unlimited number of our members, and data and images. And the amount of data and images that we process is huge. So AI helps us a lot to compensate for the lack of personnel. Yesterday on Seznam Daily, you could read an article that since the Operation Epic Fury in the Middle East, there are various images on the internet which were edited by the AI. And even our people dealt with it during the weekend. You can see that, for instance, sometimes the image shows completely different weather than in reality. That's why we need to have the best technologies in order to be able to distinguish true from false or changed images, in order to be able to provide relevant information and debunk false information. Because everywhere on the internet and social media you can see various fake satellite or ground images. So one of our goals and tasks is to either support the information or debunk it. And perhaps I did not completely answer your question about Saturn, but we decided to cooperate with companies which are able to provide technologies or supply technologies. I speak from personal experience. We learned our lesson. There are a number of skilled and good companies which are able to supply good technologies, and there are many companies who are able to show great PowerPoint presentation, but then nothing. And we cannot accept any company which brings some new solution, but then is not able to provide the technology. We need to have technologies which can be implemented quickly or deployed quickly. We cannot really discuss with some companies what they can provide in 10 years and risk that they will not be able to develop the technology in 10 years. There are also technologies that we develop ourselves, because they are not available anywhere else in the market, since the intelligence environment is so specific. We need some tools that will provide the support and bring the results that we need. When I turn to you, Jakub, from the point of view of industry, do you think that the defense industry currently has enough funding, sufficient funding? And how does era approaches cooperation with, let's say, smaller companies which might be developing some niche technology which might fit well within your portfolio. In terms of research and development and building up our portfolio, our question is clear, make or buy, whether we should reinvent the wheel or simply buy the component or implement it. And in this regard, I think there is space for smaller, let's say, niche companies that are looking for a way to accelerate development in their particular area. But what's key for our systems and our company, because we develop our systems and have been working on them for quite some time, is the protection of our know-how and intellectual property. And with regard to the current regulation, and red tape, especially in the area of cybersecurity. For instance, in terms of NIS2, is something that does not help us or makes it easier for us to look for small companies, which might be flexible but does not have the necessary infrastructure in order to be able to meet the requirements of the NIS directive. Regulation. Let's look at the biggest obstacles. The biggest obstacles either now or the biggest obstacles to the development of our industry. What would the biggest obstacles be? Well, certification process, legislative process, and of course testing, having the right kind of data, getting hold of the right data. It means you have to cooperate with a company in order to get to the data. And of course, long-term funding, because sometimes you can have great plans, but if you don't have the necessary funding, you might have to let some people go, decrease the funding, and it's not good for the product, and neither it is good for your partner. I was thinking a lot about this question, and I came to the conclusion that the ecosystem over the past 18 months or 2 years has shifted dramatically. And I don't really see the same barriers that I did 2 years ago. Of course, many things could be improved, but I think we are on the right trajectory. I can see that the environment for tech companies is improving, and one of the improvements is a better approach to testing, as well as cooperation with the army, and new space for innovative companies. I think that over the past 2 years, Europe and the Czech Republic did a great job. I would like to talk about more about cooperation between industry and the army. Jakub, what is the role of the state in the area of defense industry? So the framework of interaction, contracts, references, and so on. What is the key role of the government in this regard? I think the government should be a partner to us. We try to learn from the bigger and better. We look how the cooperation is established in countries such as the cooperation between companies and the government in countries such as Sweden or Estonia. In Estonia, a small startup was created focused on air defense. Small UAVs. And we can see the representatives that we met before, working for the Ministry of Defense, such as the State Secretary or the Chief of Staff. And now these high-ranking officials are working for the startup. So formal interconnection between the state, the Ministry of Defense, and the industry. So that's one thing. And another thing is a well-established cooperation between the state and the industry, which is multi-layered. Because as the Minister of Defense said, we need to have a multi-layered defense. And in this regard, we also need to have multi-layered cooperation. Divided into, let's say, one part which includes army, including exercise, military exercises. When we look at the Czech Republic, we've had Eagle Watch this year. In the past years, we've had regular military exercises called Drone Shield. So this is the partner or the role of our cooperation. Also cooperation at the level of the Ministry of Defense, especially the section of armament and acquisitions. When you are to sign a new contract, a large-scale contract, you need to ask yourselves whether this could be perhaps a framework contract which would open up also to other companies, because other member states also use similar formats, such as Germany. And economic diplomacy. Now I'll be doing a bit of a friendly fire, but sometimes we create a catalogue of capabilities and products, and the economic diplomacy is handing out catalogues and so on. So this is perhaps not the right role of the economic diplomacy. In my view, the main role of economic diplomacy is to support dedicated business campaigns that the industry is working on. And in the last stage, the main role of economic diplomacy is supporting the conclusion of contracts, because this is what we see when we meet other counterparts or counterparts from other countries. So multi-layered cooperation, but we've done a good job in this area. We can see some progress, so I would like to thank the government and the Ministry of Defense in this regard. I think that the processes, the way they have been established, need to be reviewed and updated in order to be able to react to the essential technological development, both in the battlefield as well as elsewhere. So we need to support the army so that it is able to implement the relevant systems. And this brings me to another question. To what extent are we or are we not able to do this? What do we have to change in order to be able to make our armed forces the main partner, reflecting the technological evolution? Because we all know that acquisitions take a lot of time. So we need to set the right impulses or send the right impulses to change this. Okay, well, this is not within my remit, so I can talk from experience, but this is within the remit of industrial cooperation. But I think the cooperation works just fine. Of course, there are some meetings of associations, regular armed conferences, business days, so there is some room for the ministry and the armed forces to be in touch and communicate with the companies. But this is not the case abroad. So this is definitely some added value that we have here in the Czech Republic, what we do here in terms of industrial cooperation. I can see the director from of the industrial cooperation section, which is sitting there. She would give you a better answer, perhaps. But when we look at the projects of defense, research and development, it falls within the remit of the Public Procurement Act, because it has some limitations for us, because research and development in the area of defense has some limits, and this needs to be addressed. But I do not want to dwell on the details because this is not within my remit. But I'm just talking from my own personal experience from previous projects that I've been involved in. Perhaps I would add that we have contacts in the area of education. We cooperate with high schools, military high schools, and universities. Perhaps we could strengthen this area, because, well, of course, not everyone has to be a soldier who studies a military high school, but could become a cybersecurity expert. And because right now many people become acquainted with the sector too late, and it would be much easier if we could if we could strengthen this area. So we need to strengthen this area of research and development.
Mr. Jenkut, do you have any position as regard to the cooperation? It's difficult to contribute or say anything else than what has already been said. Okay, so let's move to the level of keeping the global ability to defend ourselves. So how are we going to able to use the opportunities offered at the European level? I'll ask Jakub. ERA is, compared to the Czech defense industry, a champion in actually being involved in consortia as part of EIF. So are you able to be a leader of the whole consortium, an architect of the solution, or are you better in playing a smaller role, a sub-supplier of the system? What is your position? In our case, the main strategy and objective is to defend and to be a leader in the area of passive surveillance systems. When we assess the latest conflicts, the war in Ukraine, or the latest conflicts in the Middle East, there is clear situation is the conventional warfare. It starts with air defense suppression, and then there is our role important, the combination of active and passive sensors. And what we see is a change in the past 3 years, and that's the word frenemy that I mentioned at the very beginning. Although some of the companies could be assessed as competitors within the European space, it's extremely important to cooperate with such companies, to learn from them how they cooperate with their governments when talking about framework contracts, how they utilize various facilities such as SAFE. That is really important and successful as far as involvement of the European defense industry is concerned. And then active participation and also searching for initiatives. We were lucky that together with the Czech MOD, we created active cooperation in the ESI. And when we read the press briefings, we see the benefits going to the German defense industry. How do you perceive what the companies need to do that are perhaps not as experienced as ERA? So what other companies need to do with respect to European programs in order to be more successful? So what changes should they make? And how should we perhaps initiate some overall changes in the setting of our system? It was actually
abychom si nestěžovali, když do toho
It was said by Tomáš Pojara, well, we shouldn't complain if you do not go to Brussels. So the first of all, go to Brussels, have contact with the permanent representation of NATO, or have contacts at the Ministry of Industry and Trade and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So be active, actively search for opportunities, and also actively and regularly coordinate so that we are able to use the specific opportunities that come up. I would like to mention in this context also various organized trips of Czech defense companies, and also the need to open up branches in Brussels. And in that we have only CSG as the only Czech company opening their office in Brussels. So these are the arguments that we often hear from Radka Kondrolová, that the Czech industry should be more active. I would also welcome interaction with the delegation, with Ambassador and his team, and also with officials in Brussels. I would like to call on the companies to be active in communication with our people. And it's really worth organize and interconnect the cooperation with the various structures that come into contact with some initiatives and opportunities. So there is really information flow among all the stakeholders, the flow that would be smoother and more targeted. So with the colleagues in various agencies, we discussed this issue, and the associations could also play the role so that the diplomats, not only economic diplomats, could be better informed about Czech companies, Czech technology, so that they could play an important sort of bridging role. I will also ask, as far as the European initiatives are concerned, we know that the Commission is preparing a massive increase of funding for the multi-year financial framework. Also, there are political industrial coalitions, the EU, similarly to NATO, defined fundamental capabilities that we as member states need to build with the capability targets. And we know what is the situation of the Czech Republic, unfortunately, within the European Union and these initiatives. In order to be able to use all the opportunities from the point of view of investors, how do you see the initiatives of the European Investment Bank that comes up with a new venture capital fund? Should the Czech Republic be involved? 100%. There are lots of ideas, lots of startups that need to be supported at various stages. So we always check what is the phase of this initiative, so we need to follow that. And our investment strategy needs to be correlated to the NATO technology strategy. So NATO countries are our stakeholders, so we need to know what they demand. But also there is a certain window for drawing the funds. You have to be agile, and you cannot set the conditions in order to block the startups. Sometimes there are some regional restrictions, and that's something that we really have to consider. Well, on Monday, I had a call with the European Investment Fund
that work with the defense fund, and I can see certain evolution. The fund of funds that was drawn last year, 150 million euros. It was called defense, but there were certain restrictions regarding single-use startups, so primarily defense technologies. With the new fund that is going to be opened in June, these restrictions have been lifted, so they move a step forward so that really it makes sense for those funds that want to do really defense technologies, that do not want to hide behind the label of dual technology. And there is NATO Innovation Fund. It's a billion fund at the level of NATO countries. For example, France and USA are not part of it. So not every country participates, but primarily it is a fund that is labeled as a fund supporting defense technologies, and within the investment documentation, it is not allowed to invest into single-use startups, into startups that only focus on defense technologies. But I think still they are on a good way, and in a year or two, there are certain changes. So the cooperation is important, but still we are not where we really should be. The last example I want to give you is at the US venture capital funds. Vast majority funding comes from pension funds and university funds. The level of cooperation in Europe is non-existent. What would really help is the private sector and the venture capital sector connection and growing of the volume of pension funds investing into venture capital funds. I think that often we hear that the European market is really missing a single capital market that would overcome the brutal fragmentation that we experience within the whole EU. In this context, I want to ask, from your point of view, is it possible at all for a Czech startup to be funded within the Czech Republic, within the Czech environment? It's impossible. It's impossible also within the European context. And we are really talking about startups. You can build a huge global defense company out from the Czech Republic, such as CSG. This is a world leader in several technologies. As for startups, in the European context, it's impossible as we do not have the needed capital. We have a capital that scales to TRL 6-7. So we are talking about dozens of millions of euros. But when we talk about investment into scalability of production and manufacture of these technologies, then we talk about hundreds of millions of euros. And right now in Europe, there are no funds available that would be able to invest such an amount of money. And, you know, the startup reaches a critical level, around 1 billion, and then a US fund comes in and funds the huge round, which is a pity because we lose sovereignty. I'm not saying it's too bad, but it would be really good if we would have funds for scalability of the technology to level 7 and up. Yes. So if you want to have a successful startup, you need to scale, and sometimes you need to have foreign investor, as then you get the doors open in order to develop the startup into a global brand. And we have many Czech companies that are already global companies, and we shouldn't really say it should only be the Czech capital, but any capital that would move the companies up and open the door. So if we are to send the right message. Recently, the Czech government approved a new strategy. Minister Havlíček talks about supporting innovation. It's his priority. At the same time, the defense industry is labeled as a potential new engine for the Czech economy. So let's list some specific impulses that the Czech government should consider in order to implement their priorities as they declare it.
The defense industry is one of the very advanced areas in the Czech Republic. We have great talents, great potential, and if we support it with capital and open the doors to create more links to business, it could be our flagship, and we could become a center for dual use or defense technologies, because we have the brains, we have the know-how, and even the capital is here. I would like to emphasize that 2025 was a breakthrough year for startups, because a new legislation was adopted, which is very important for startups, and it makes it possible for them to grow much better than before. Two things that I would like to emphasize. One of them, easier testing for army, because it's very difficult for innovative startups to get in touch with someone who could be the end user. And the support for pension funds, for venture capital, with venture capital or private equity. We can see that in the US it is working just fine. It is working great, and it could we could be inspired here in Europe. Who could play the main role in connecting know-how about the financed startup technologies and the end users? Who could be the main mediator, so to say? Well, we have this role currently, because we already have a network of contacts, so we try to help. But if you don't find someone with experience, it's very difficult to get the right contacts. There is one innovative company in Ukraine that is kind of like the contact point for defense companies. I'm sure we have lots of accelerators here. Czech Invest is doing a great job, and we also have a number of associations which provide opportunities to startups to show their potential. And, but still, the debate is not open enough, and many companies still do not know what the opportunities are. When we look at the representative of defense industry here, Jakub, what are your impulses and ideas for improving or streamlining the system, the testing? How do you perceive it on behalf of ERA? When we look at the area of acquisitions and funding, it is very difficult to accelerate acquisitions or streamline acquisitions without changing the legislation, changing the processes, and increasing the number of employees in the area of acquisitions and and armament. As was mentioned here last year already, we need to increase funding and personnel, but if we want to look at the instruments and tools available, we should look at what instruments are being implemented abroad. One model of cooperation is a cooperation between private and public sector PPP projects. I could name a number of projects such as integrated surveillance systems from Singapore. It is a cooperation between DSTA, a state enterprise, and industry in the area of UAV detection. Another PPP project implemented in the UK is Marshall project, provision of surveillance systems and systems for armed forces, and air traffic systems for the armed forces. So these are a number of PPP projects. Last year, we presented one such project to the Ministry of Defense. It was a project focused on stationary systems of air defense. And another instrument is a NATO instrument called Capability as a Service. It's focused on implementation of basic capabilities provided as a service. It's a project or Task Force X in the Baltic states, where NATO paid to a British company for patrolling and reconnaissance and surveillance in the Baltics through drones and UAVs. So this could be a way to accelerate acquisitions and overcome the challenges in the area of funding. Thank you. This is a key aspect in order to streamline processes or changing the acquisition processes here in the Czech Republic so that tech companies that have a much shorter innovation cycle or innovative cycle have the opportunity to offer their technologies to the armed forces. And we should look at impulses which would make it possible to streamline the processes, make them more flexible. We should approach proven and tested, battlefield-tested technologies in a different way than pilot projects and promises. We should look at the institute mentioned by Jakub, focused on using defense and arms systems not only as a product but as a service, to have relations set up which would be able to update the systems with regard to innovation and changes. So, how do you think that the cooperation between the end user, meaning the army, and the industry could be improved? What should we do? Well, again, this is not within my remit, but I know from experience which company, if a company wants to cooperate with military intelligence, they need to have a security clearance so that they can even communicate with us, that we are able to provide some data to the company for testing of their systems. And so that we know whether it even makes sense to cooperate with the company. So yes, security clearance. Thank you very much. I think that what we all need is to have long-term vision. It was emphasized here as well. This is the most important thing for us, to have a strategy that will help us join our forces, be it financial sector and public sector or the industry, the army and our partners, so that so that we can rely on our politicians to be ready to use the opportunities at the European level offered to them. We also talked about political coalitions created at the EU level. These will be strategic, long-term coalitions that the Czech Republic has to join in cooperation with the Chamber of Commerce and the Association of Defense Industry and the Association of Air Defense and Cosmic Industry. We've initiated a letter where we emphasize the importance of the Czech Republic being involved in these coalitions so that the Czech industry can be part of this initiative. It would be a shame if the Czech Republic was left aside, was looking at it from the outside, because the Czech defense industry needs our government to be proactive, use these opportunities and help involve the Czech industry. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to thank the panelists for their contributions and their reactions. I think this topic is not an easy one. It's a very complex topic. It needs great effort from the public sector in order to change the systems and processes. And on behalf of the industry, on behalf of the association, and together with other members of the Association of the Czech Aerospace Industry, we stand ready to give you a helping hand. Thank you for your attention.